From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris here on a Wednesday, and I hope you will join in the conversation, as always, especially today. We're going to get the phone number up there in a moment. Tonight, you may have seen some of the promos running over the past 24 hours or so regarding my special report that airs at 6 o'clock. And I hope you'll tune in because it goes to the topic of personal security. It goes to the topic of safety in places that you would assume should be safe, and you don't need this type of precautionary action taken. And I'm talking about schools first, but specifically here, and let's face it, we here in the Nashville Mid-State area, we are the buckle of the Bible Belt. So many churches. Church security. We all know this past June, the horrible, horrible tragedy that happened at the Black Church in Charleston. Now, that really, I think, was a call to action and got the attention of many congregations and pastors, but certainly this has been going on well before that horrible incident. But the question is, security in churches, meaning, do you need tactical training at your churches to prepare for an active shooter? What about weapons in churches? Tonight's piece that we're previewing more or less today focuses on one local group that helps working with specifically churches on security and doing tactical training in the churches. And we're going to get into that, and whether you think that's something you need to feel safe when you worship, or if you think maybe it's overboard in your mind. What do you think? My experience is that these types of horrible shootings these days can happen anywhere. So why not be prepared? The number is 737-7587. Joining us this morning to talk about it, Bill Janelle. Nice to have you on, sir.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good to have you. And you are one of the founders of Agape Tactical.
Correct.
Which is the group here in town that I guess it's based here in the Mid-State region. And give us a little bit of background about what Agape is all about and why you guys started it. How long ago was this?
Okay. Well, Agape Tactical began a little over 2 years ago.
Okay.
And the founder actually was a fellow by the name of Ken Alexandro. Ken was associated with another company in town that did carry permits and those kinds of things.
Sure.
And at a point where we felt like that we needed to expand, Ken and I got together and we put together Agape Tactical. I'm not one of the owners. I just helped get Agape started, and we have seen great success since that period of time. Mainly because of the people understanding more and more today the need for security.
And certainly, as I mentioned, Charleston, you see that. You see some of these horrible shootings on college campuses, in schools. Now, what caught my attention as a journalist is there are a lot of active shooter trainings that go on, and law enforcement does it a lot as well. What caught my attention is, a place, of worship, where you hope it's safe, where you can go and peacefully, congregate and worship. That's something you guys have focused on to some degree, correct? Preparing churches, which is a little different. But, I mean, how did that come about?
Well, the way that came about, quite frankly, is because Agape Tactical is a Christian-based company. We live by and go by Judeo-Christian principles, and we started actually in our own church.
Okay.
With the understanding and knowing that the atmosphere has changed. Over the years, it's changed a lot. There was the day that you could go to church and you didn't have to worry about anything at all. You could go and worship freely. And
doors are unlocked a lot of times. People can walk in. Sure.
And not just churches, but any houses of worship.
Sure.
So, as a result of that, there was a team that was put together. There was a safety team that was put together, and as I came onto the scene about 4 years ago, that safety team was in place, and we just very simply beefed it up, and we started doing more training. And as we started doing more training, there were churches then that would call us and they would say, "We understand that you've got a safety team. So how do we go about doing this?" And that's a bit of how Agape Tactical then came about.
All right. When you talk about a safety team, there may be specific individuals that maybe serve as security. We'll get into more of the details, but part of what you're going to see in my special report tonight is I was invited out to a church which will remain unnamed here in the mid-state region, where people came from all around the state really for this training. And so we're talking about congregation members maybe being trained. You're going to see some real action in this piece tonight in the church. With actually some weapons, actual weapons with simunitions and airsoft.
Correct.
But they're being trained what? To the worst case scenario?
Being trained for the worst case scenario, but also being trained to deter anything that would happen and come in. The thing that we do is we don't train our people to just be able to shoot.
Okay.
We train the congregation, we train everyone that we can that wants to be involved in how to very simply be alert. Be alert for anything that could happen, anything that's strange, anything that is out of line, anything that is out of place, and then very simply either report that to the safety team, or if it is one of the safety team members, then take whatever action is appropriate.
Right, and we should say both you and Ken and others come from a law enforcement background.
Correct.
I mean, as you said, Ken has talked about you as being one of his mentors, and your background, if you would. This isn't something you just read in a book. You've lived this. What's your background?
I am a retired police officer from the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. Was a full-time officer for over 20 years, and then from that point forward I ran reserve departments, and today I serve as the chaplain with the Spring Hill Police Department. And so my background is mostly in patrol division. Okay. I was not in what's CID or detectives, and was one of the patrol division commanders. So we have collectively with Agape over 200 years of experience with all of our trainers. So our trainers come from local law enforcement, our trainers come from state, federal. So our trainers come from a little of every place. We train people as if we're training police officers because we don't know any other way to do it.
Right.
That's the way we do.
Yeah, and that it's something that you learned, and you're passing this on now to civilians. And
Absolutely.
That's what gets me, and that was so interesting to me is you think about the idea of schools to some degree, people are trying to get used to this idea, but churches, I mean, we're talking about having people armed in churches, are we not?
We are.
Weapons in churches.
Correct.
I suppose your place of worship, there are people there that concealed carry, properly permitted and everything, have guns in the church.
That's correct.
With the idea of if we don't and something happens, we're not prepared.
Correct. The era has changed, as we all know. The tragic shootings at schools, at churches, at just places of gathering.
Well, we had that incident at the movie theater in Antioch a few months back. The fellow that went in there and he had a hatchet and a pellet gun, but still, that was awful scary.
Absolutely. We know that, and the Department of Homeland Security has actually determined that there are 3 major what are called soft targets.
Okay.
One of those would be schools, one would be churches or synagogues, mosque, any places of worship, and the other one would be malls.
When you say soft target, what does that mean again?
Soft target means that's where a person would think this is an easy place to go because this would be a place where guns are normally not allowed.
Right.
Okay. So most of the people there won't have guns, so I can go in and do anything I want to do.
That's the mindset. Thinking
that's the mindset.
You believe that's changing?
Well, I believe it's changing drastically and quickly, very fast.
Based on the personal experience of Agape at this point, the number of churches that have contacted you for training, and this is in their minds, these are not churches that have had something bad happen.
No,
these
that's
are ones
correct.
that have seen on the news what's happened, and they want to be prepared.
Right, precautions. They want to take the precautions. They don't want to close the barn door after the horse is out. They want to keep the horses in.
And that makes sense. But for those who may watch and say, listen, I think maybe that sounds like a good idea, but maybe it's not for everyone. Some people maybe can't get past the idea of, I certainly understand trying to protect myself, but this is our church. It's a place of worship. The idea of bringing guns in here and knowing there are armed men in a situation, gosh, it just goes against what I've been taught growing up. As you said, years ago, you never would have thought of something like this. What would you say to individuals like that?
Well, there's no question about the fact that as time has changed and as the scenarios have changed, 50 years ago, you're absolutely right. This was absolutely unheard of that anybody would carry a gun into a church for protection.
Right.
50 years ago, they wouldn't even wear a hat, much less carry a gun. Today, that has changed completely. Today, not only is it acceptable, it's almost a necessity. And when I say it's a necessity, because of the fact that so many things have happened, the South Carolina shooting, tragic shooting, is a perfect example of someone coming into a church, the people welcoming people into the church, which we want to do. We want our doors to be open. We want we want people to feel free, to be able to come in, to be able to worship, to be able to learn, to be able to study. But at the same time, we have to be prepared for that person that could, as happened in South Carolina, that person that could come in, sit down, and during the time of prayer, start killing people. This was a tragic thing, and this was a thing that may have very well been a faith-based shooting, or could have been, and more likely was a situation of a racial shooting. So we have to be prepared for that. So churches today are understanding more and more that on some level we have to start preparing ourselves for what could very well be the inevitable. That level could be anything from just an awareness of what's going on around us, to doing exactly what we teach to do, and that is all the way through complete training on how to take care of the congregation at the time. We live by a premise that when seconds count, police are minutes away, and that's the truth. Where the police officers are spread far and thin, they cannot be every place at one time.
The goal, as they were saying in the training that you will see in the piece tonight, is to eliminate the threat. And you teach them how to do that. Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, Joe and others, if you're on hold, stay there. We'll get to your phone calls, your thoughts on church security. And what we talk about, we say church security, it's really no different. We'll get into this than any security that can be in place anywhere. But again, as we just talked about, churches are one of these places where that's a real change in the times for what's happening in there now. We'll take a break, be back with more of your calls and more of our conversation with our guest right after this.